And we'll start off at the White House. President Obama admitting that he doesn't really have a real strategy on how to deal with ISIS in safe havens like Syria. For now, he's turning to Secretary of State John Kerry. Kerry will travel to the region to build a coalition of partners to help combat Islamic State militants. Right now, President Obama says his major concern remains how to protect American assets and interests in Iraq.
My priority at this point is to make sure that the gains that ISIL made in Iraq are rolled back and that Iraq has the opportunity to govern itself.
Well, earlier this week, the president approved military surveillance flights over Syria, but he stopped short of any kind of military action there. So far, U.S. planes have carried out over 100 airstrikes in Iraq. And right now, federal investigators are trying to figure out how and why one community in Minnesota spawned at least 2 radicalized militants, including Douglas McCain, who died fighting for ISIS. His best friend and classmate, Tony Castigar, died fighting for al-Shabaab, a terror group in Somalia, back in 2009. It's still unclear why they were drawn to radicalism after they converted to the Muslim faith. Well, terrorist groups are known to target young men in Minneapolis, a city with a large Somali population. And today, the United Nations is trying to figure out how to deal with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Less than 24 hours ago, the UN Security Council held an emergency meeting to discuss the latest incursion of Russian military assets into the eastern part of that country and to assist Ukrainian rebels. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, says Russia is lying about its involvement in the conflict.
Every step, Russia has come before this council to say everything except the truth. It has manipulated, it has obfuscated, it has outright lied. So we have learned to measure Russia by its actions and not by its words.
The Russian envoy to the UN said it's all conjecture. The UN meeting came hours after Ukrainian officials confirmed that 2 columns of Russian tanks and military vehicles fired missiles from Russia at the Ukrainian border and then moved into that country. Now we turn our attention to West Africa, where the Ebola crisis is getting worse every day. Senegal now confirming a first case there. And a top U.S. official says Ebola is not, if it's not stopped, it could continue to be a problem for years around the world. Dr. Tom Friedman, the director of the CDC, is visiting Liberia's capital, Monrovia, where health workers are struggling to contain the virus. Ebola killed more than 1,500 people so far. Also, the National Institutes of Health, I should say, will begin testing an experimental vaccine for Ebola on humans next week. And in Virginia, the search for the pilot of that F-15 jet that crashed in the mountains there is over. Rescuers found evidence that the pilot did not eject in time. The search lasted over 2 days. It involved more than 100 officials and volunteers. The investigation into what caused the crash remains ongoing. The pilot was headed to New Orleans for routine maintenance. He reported an in-flight emergency before losing radio contact.